Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in this one, I want to talk about housing again, not single family or what's going on in the housing market per se. I want to talk about multifamily. So this is going to target people who buy and purchase multifamily units, and this is also going to target renters. So there's a big change happening in the multifamily space. You guys need to be aware of it. It is going to drive rents through the roof. Forget about affordable rents, and this is all government regulation again. Let's run over here. So we're going to take a look at this Smart Cities Dive. 5 U.S. cities target building energy use, emissions with fines. Let's run down into this. This is absolutely alarming. New York City, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Boston, and St. Louis are preparing to fine building owners who fail to comply with newly enacted or updated local regulations. In most cases, they limit large buildings' greenhouse gas emissions or curb energy usage. So let's dive down into this a little bit more. There's 30 U.S. municipalities that are phasing in these higher standards for commercial buildings. Now, these are typically targeted right now, and actually we see this all the time. They target the largest guys. So these are 25,000 square feet or more buildings, which is very easy to get to in multifamily. And then we'll see it roll out there, and then eventually we will see it cascade its way down into the mom and pop. So if you have a house and you're a landlord, suddenly you find yourself in this new crazy housing market, becoming a landlord, this is something you may want to start to keep an eye on. I don't think it'll hit you in the near term, but in the long term, this could definitely become an issue. So while regulations vary, the cost could be a significant new line expense, which would be borne by owners and possibly even tenants. Guys, it will absolutely affect the tenants. Rent is your only income. I mean, outside of usually some tertiary little items, if we're looking at multifamily, you're thinking laundry, that type of stuff, but rent is your primary income. They will absolutely have to pass this cost along. This will drive rents way, way up to the tune of, we run down here and we take a look. The HVAC systems are primarily what they're targeting here. So that's what we're going to talk about in this particular instance. They're trying to get them all moved to electric, which is frightening because now you're locked into one power source. This article doesn't highlight or talk about, and this figure I'm about to give you does not reflect the price of electricity versus, let's say, a natural gas system, or if you had a boiler where it was powered by natural gas, where it used water to heat the system. I think a lot of those systems in New York are boiler systems. That's not easy to convert to an electric system. But the article cites, it says HVAC systems will vary with the situation, but could be up to $60 per square foot of additional cost. $60 per square foot, guys. That's insanity. We run down here. It starts to talk about the fines that they get into. So properties that exceed, so in New York is far and away, and I will show you what their rating system looks like, and we'll talk about what that consists of here in a minute and how they measure it. It's a one-size-fits-all system. It's absolutely ludicrous. But privately owned, always privately owned. The government buildings are always exempted. Privately owned buildings larger than 50,000 square feet that fail to meet the new energy consumption standards by 2026 will incur a penalty of $10 per square foot, not to exceed $7.5 million. $7.5 million, guys, per year. You imagine this additional expense? Insanity. You're going to have to spend $6 to $7.5 million a year regardless. You can either upgrade this HVAC system or pay the fines. Properties that exceed the limits will face fines of $268 per metric ton over the limit starting in 2024, with stricter standards starting in 2030. And guys, this has already started rolling out in San Francisco. They're charging these people $100 a day. Right now, it's capped at 25 days per calendar year or 12-month period. So $2,500 right now is where you're at in San Francisco. A landlord will probably eat that rather than do the upgrades, but understand those fines are going to continue to rise and escalate. The rules meant to encourage owners to invest in HVAC systems, early replacement, and make other improvements will challenge certain commercial mortgage-backed securities collateral. Guys, it's going to make a lot of properties highly insolvent, and these are big-time properties. It's just, this is going to ravage the commercial real estate market as this continues to roll out. So let's show you what a scoring system looks like. So they send people out. They basically look at the building envelope and then the systems that are in place, and they give the building an overall grade. If you're in New York, you can see these posted on the building. So whatever example building this is got a B rating. It gives you last year's and then the previous year's rating. So you can see it's a little fuzzy. I apologize for that. 2018 rating, 2017 rating. So it looks like they've improved this rating over time. But that's what they're using to score it. Now, the problem with this system is it's a one-size-fits-all system. So you have a multifamily in New York with its wild temperature swings and everything else, heating and cooling requirements. It would have to be compared to a similar-sized building across the country. So it would also be measured against, let's say, an empty commercial space in Arizona. So I don't know that these are fair comparisons. I don't think the one-size-fits-all system is very good to begin with. I don't think any of this is necessary. I don't think that these systems should be applied retroactively to buildings that were built 100 years ago. I think it's an unfair standard. I think there's an underlying ulterior motive here to begin to move people into public housing. And let me remind you, we did public housing. A lot of it got torn down in the 70s. Let me play you a little clip from this YouTube channel about how public housing goes. So for you guys out there advocating for affordable housing, we'll get into why the private sector isn't building affordable housing. But if you're looking at the government to solve this, let me show you some issues that happened in the past when we counted on the government to provide housing. The private sector is far and away the superior approach to solve for housing. Okay, this is from City Beautiful.
Public housing policy in the United States is notorious for concentrating poverty, then not providing enough money for building maintenance and policing. The result was housing so bad that cities have been tearing down buildings ever since the 1970s. But today, there are people advocating for bringing back public housing. There's even a name for these people, FIMBYs, for public housing in my backyard. Their argument is that we're in a massive housing crisis, and if the private market can't provide affordable housing, then the government needs to step in. They are undaunted by the negative legacy of public housing. Does public housing have a place in U.S. housing policy?
I encourage you to go watch the video. It goes on to talk about public housing. Guys, you think about, and many of you aren't old enough to remember, some of you are, the housing that was in New York was just scary. The police wouldn't go into it. It was so crime-ridden. It was so dangerous. I don't know how you could advocate to go back to that system. We are so fortunate to have moved away from it. It's never worked. If you think about public transportation, public housing is the same way. It's subsidized. It never funds itself enough and inevitably gets cut and whittled down. Tell me, would you go ride on the subway right now in New York? No, you wouldn't. It's crime-ridden. You take your life in your own hands. You want to do that with your house? You sleep there. You don't sleep on the subway. You're at your most vulnerable in your home, and you're going to count on the government to keep you safe and provide you with quality, adequate place to live? Dude, they can't even get you somewhere quality and on time. God, the subway's terrible. The bus system's terrible. Nobody's ever like, yeah, let's take public transportation because it's awesome. It's not. It sucks. When the government gets involved, it's garbage. Stop advocating for government housing. It's not going to work. Stop advocating for subsidized housing. It never works. It's always garbage. Let's talk about, he touched on this, if the private sector can't build affordable housing, it's not that the private sector can't build affordable housing, it's that the government and these municipalities will not let them build affordable housing. And it all centers around because most of them have adopted this International Building Code. The International Building Code is a total encompassing package of all these subset building codes right here. All of this running down here: residential code, fire code, plumbing code, mechanical code, fuel and gas code, energy conservation code. It goes on and on. And I hate to say it, Wyoming's adopted some of this. So some of this is a problem here as well. Now, this, to give you an example, like in the electrical code, you have to have separate circuits for just like the microwave, the refrigerator, like you name it, it's all on these separate circuits. You're having to build these huge electrical systems. You know, you're having to put in 300-400 amps to a house to service all of this stuff, to spread it all out, to have a big enough panel. Those things are expensive. The panel's like $2,500. Like, you're driving up the cost trying to meet all these crazy codes. They can't afford to build 2-in-1s anymore that are baselines and come in and get in and cheap. That's why you're not seeing affordable housing. It just continues to go on. If you want to stab yourself in the face and you really hate yourself, I will link to the International Building Code in the description. I encourage absolutely no one to read this. It is horrible and terrible and takes way too much time. The other thing that the International Building Code does, and this is just, it stymies and limits all type of creativity in architecture. And I don't know why architects aren't on board for screaming and railing against this. It's why, and you have to see this wherever you live. Why do all new apartment buildings look the same? There are multiple articles out here talking about this. Think about it. As you see new construction go up, it all looks the same. Go to Billings, Montana, and it's all retail shops on the bottom, and then it's 4 or 5 layers of apartments above it because they meet the International Building Code. They're easy to build. They're quick. Just knock them out. There's no individuality. The whole city looks the same when you start to go down this route. Look at Seattle. That's all they're doing in Seattle. They're cookie cutter rolling out all of these. Not that you want to go to Seattle. They cookie cutter roll out all of these buildings that look like this. Go to the west end of Billings, and this stuff's coming up left and right. And that's just here to exactly. You tell me that you don't have these being built in your. It's why everything looks the same. It's about the only way you can build stuff to meet the International Building Code. It is absolutely prohibitively expensive if you get outside of this. No, builders can't afford to build affordable housing, and it's all because of government regulation. And now, with these new regulations that they're going to put in place for this ESG nonsense, be prepared for your rent to go up on what are your more affordable units now, because they're going to retroactively raise rents back there because they're going to make all these buildings have to be retroactively fit. If your building has a small crack in it or there's some sort of energy leak, you have to refacade the entire outside of the building to try to get into this new ratings. These landlords are going to have to pass on the costs and be prepared. They are going to be substantial. So I don't have positive news on affordable housing. The government is backing everyone into a corner, and they are absolutely driving the price of rents up. And this is all that it is. It's regulation. It's bureaucrats. And then they're going to drive you into public housing, and good luck. I pray for you and your family if you're forced into public housing. It is absolutely you might as well be in Gen Pop, because it basically dissolves into this just absolute mayhem ridden with crime and drugs. So keep voting for the same people. Keep voting for the same stuff. Stop fighting. Stop fighting. Don't say anything. Don't get involved. Sit on the sidelines. That's great. This is exactly what you'll get out of that approach. I encourage you guys to fight back. I encourage you guys to say stuff. I encourage you guys to get out. I encourage you guys to talk about it. This is what's coming, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.